are you doing? Good. Right. Oh, here we go. This looks good. So, I'm Alex Nisbett. I'm from Livework in London. And in a change to our schedule, I'm going to be talking about the design and delivery of the London 2012 Spectator Experience, okay? Apologies if anybody was expecting Todd up here. He's been taken unwell. We wish him all the very, very best. So I was quite happy to step in, whatever you want to call it, and tell you a little bit about a story that, a thing that happened to me a couple of years ago, which was basically my dream project. My dream project come true, if you like. So I've worked at Livework for the last 2 years. Prior to that, I worked for LOCOG. That's the London Organising Committee of the Olympic and Paralympic Games. So they're the people that sort of chiefly responsible for organising and running the Summer Olympics. I was the first service designer there, although to be fair, I was actually called a project manager. But then by the time I kind of left, my official job title was service designer. And I don't know if Tamsin Smith is in the audience. Tamsin, she's up there at the back there. She was my co-service designer at the Olympics. Right, so can we actually, is there any chance we could turn the lights down just a little bit on the screen? Because this is pretty much all pictures, okay? And I really want you to be able to sort of enjoy them in sort of full Technicolor. I don't know if that's possible. Anybody up there? Okay. Alrighty. Okay, I have to start off with a few numbers. That's really important, just to set a bit of context for the Olympics. So, London is only the only city to have hosted 3 Summer Olympic Games. There were 10,490-ish Olympic athletes and 4,200 Paralympic athletes. There were 36 Olympic sports, 21 Paralympic sports. There were over 170 venues. So that's not just the sporting venues, but we're talking about transport hubs, training venues, accreditation venues. Over 11 million tickets sold, so that's over 11 million spectators over that sort of 5 or 6 week period. At Games time, there were over 270,000 staff, and that includes the 70,000 games makers or volunteers. And probably for some of you, maybe the most interesting number, the total cost, or the budget, was $13.54 billion. But luckily, clever people that we came in with a surplus of 572 million. Still, it's a big expense. It's a super big expense, and it's quite a high-risk kind of thing to do in a way, host the Olympics. There have been a few cities over the years that have kind of declined to bid for it, or maybe they bid for it and figured it wasn't such a good idea after all because they didn't want to be seen to be spending taxpayers' money. I'd like to introduce you to 4 critically important people in LOCOG, if you like. So these are the most important people that make everything really, really happen. So the first guy who turned out to be our chief executive officer, our CEO, he came from a merchant bank, investment bank background, so he knew how to talk to the city. He knew how to get money. He knew how to organize really big, expensive activities. The second most important person actually worked at Atlanta in 1996. I don't know if any of you remember, but there was a terrorist incident at Atlanta. And London, back in 2012, they were hypersensitive about anything like that happening again. So the head of Game Times operations had that particular experience. Third most important person was our head of brand and marketing. Now, he came from a European train service called Eurostar. So he was particularly good at understanding customers and brand and marketing. And fourth, and not really last, that's our chairman, that's Seb Coe. He's an Olympic athlete, so he knows what it is to work super hard to succeed. He knows what it means to work super hard to succeed. Now, he didn't just do that on the track sort of 20-odd years ago. He also did that, shall we say, in the boardroom. So this is Singapore, July 2005, so that's 7 years before Games time. He's just managed to pitch rather well and win the bid, and he's receiving the bid documents from Jack Rogge, who was the president of the IOC at that point. The reason I'm putting that up there is what he said. So he sets out the stall for his vision, if you like, his experience vision, right at the very beginning. He's saying, we want to deliver a magical atmosphere, an electrifying experience for competitors and spectators. So probably the most important person who said right at the very beginning, we're going to be thinking about spectators. Now, previous to this, no other Olympic Games had explicitly thought about a spectator experience. Basically, spectators were bums on seats. That was pretty much all it was. There was no kind of thought about their overall experience. We learned an awful lot from previous games, and I think probably Sydney was the first to certainly think about volunteers and to start to think about what a spectator experience looked like. But it was really London that has sort of set the benchmark, possibly there. So after Lord Coe said that we were going to really focus on spectators, nothing happened for about sort of 5 years or so. And it was clear that spectators, like customers, like consumers, they need to be owned and loved and cared for by somebody in the organisation. Unfortunately, they were kind of passed a little bit from pillar to post. So initially, it was the ticketing department thought that they should own the spectator relationship. And then the team that sort of does the sort of crowd management, if you like, in the high-vis jackets, they thought that maybe they would have the relationship. Luckily, the marketing team stepped up and thought, no, this isn't going to work. We need to think about the whole experience, not just when you get your ticket and not just when you're walking from venue to venue. So luckily, with a couple of years to go, the brand and marketing took up the ownership of that particular client group. One of the first things that they did, now this is just a little bit before I joined, one of the first things they did was to say, okay, architects, let's come together, let's understand what we think that experience for the spectators is going to look like and importantly feel like. So you can imagine that thousands and thousands of drawings and plans have been created for all the new stadia and all the existing venues. And one of the things that we learnt very, very quickly was that in looking at the crowd flows and the timings and the schedules, that up to 40% of your day would be spent queuing, lining up. 40% of your once-in-a-lifetime experience is going to be spent in a line, in a queue. Now, clearly, that's not a particularly great experience. You might go, well, that's life, that's what we just got to grin and bear it. But clearly, that wasn't really going to win the Olympics many friends, especially, and I'm sure if you've been to London in the summer, it could either be tipping it down with rain, as we've experienced here over the last few days, or it can be scorching hot. Now, this was the austerity games. There was not an awful lot of money flying around to be able to build, I don't know, sort of beautiful sort of sunshades or kind of like lots of seating areas. There simply wasn't the money to do that. But luckily, there was quite a lot of research, but I think as one or two of the other speakers have been explaining, a lot of that research that the client provides is more quant. It's more about understanding the demographics of spectators, where they live, how much they earn, what cars they drive. That's not really useful because we want to understand behaviours of spectators. And we realised that spectators were going to be treating it a bit like a festival, or a little bit like some kind of a fair or a concert, as well as a sporting environment. Now, some of these things will be familiar, so we co-created a vision, a chance for everyone to be part of the greatest show on earth, Britain's personal best. So that's what everybody's aiming for. And of course, there was a lot of focus on journeys before, during, and after the Games experience. There was a big focus on sporting legacy, those kind of things that hopefully you're going to start doing when you get home and carry on doing for a number of years afterwards, because sporting legacy is a very important part of the promise, and also what Lord Coe had set out. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to provide post-Games. Now, just a little bit of a word about the team that I was in, the team that Tamsin joined. I like to say we came late to the party, and by that I mean that budgets had all been signed off, plans had been locked down years previously, and there was actually very, very little we could do. So remember that 40% of your day in queues, you might be rained on, might be sunned on. So we clearly wanted to do something about the experience, but our hands were a little bit tied. So what did we do? So what you do is you look for the weak spot in the organization. By weak spot, I mean the risk of failure. So this this is not sort of return on investment, if you like. This is certainly fear of failure. And there were a number of venues which were new venues, like the Olympic Stadium, and they'd been designed very well with experience in mind. But there were an awful lot of venues which were either old, sort of creaking at the edges, or venues that we were going to use in ways that they weren't designed to be used. So if you're used to coming to a venue and there's a two-way system, if you like, but at games time we're going to operate a strict one-way system. So you come to that venue and you're immediately told you can't behave in the way that you're used to behaving, which means that people can pitch up too late, get messed about by having to then perform in different ways and miss their sporting activities. So what we did was we designed a strategy that was going to support positive venue operations. So to reduce risk, we had a huge risk register. This wasn't like an opportunity map. It was kind of the opposite. It's where all the problems are going to be, where big problems are going to be that risk shutting venues down. But in actual fact, whether you start from an opportunity map or a risk register, you actually get to about the same place. Something that's going to address the challenge, but also something that's going to deliver a good experience for the spectators. And kind of central to that strategy, if you like, was this idea of high-performing spectators. So if we can prepare spectators to get to the right place at the right time and in the right state of mind, they're going to provide that perfect backdrop for the broadcasters and the athletes. They're going to know what good looks like, so understand where to applaud, if you like, if it's a game sport they haven't seen before. But also they're more likely to spend a little bit of money on, sort of McDonald's or T-shirts or that kind of thing. So there's high-performing spectators. And you know what? That works for high-performing passengers, high-performing patients, high-performing customers as well, if you think about that, helping your customers to perform more highly. There are also high-performing venues that kind of figured out how they were going to reconfigure the venue during quiet times between games and sporting events. So this is the hockey arena, practicing, erecting and then taking down inflatable pitches to give youngsters a taste of playing street hockey. And we got to about a month before games time. Bit of a problem with communications was an interesting one. So there's a little bit of a failure here that we had to admit to. We began to realize that a lot of the spectators, like us consumers, are very savvy, very media savvy. And if they were getting emails from LOCOG, they kind of assumed it was something from the shop, or maybe a partner is trying to sell me insurance or something like that. When in actual fact, a lot of that information was quite critical information to prepare them for the games. We also realized that an information spectator guide, a little A4 printed leaflet, which they received in their tickets sort of 6 months previously. That was really vital, but I don't know about you, but most spectators would get their tickets and go, "Oh, brilliant! Can't wait to go," and they'd put them on the, bookshelf or something like that, and not even have a look inside. And we found out with some research that people simply weren't aware of the fact that there was going to be airport-style security. You can't take umbrellas in, all of that kind of stuff. So we risked people turning up very, very late. And possibly we'd have to close the doors because it was going to affect the venues. So what we did, we sent out quite a scary SMS. It's basically saying, you'll receive an email today with critical information. If you don't read it, you risk missing your event. Quite a scary kind of message. Now you might say, not everybody's got a phone. Not everybody's sort of subscribed to texts. So if we didn't see people sort of click through to the website, which told you what you have to do, we sent them a letter. So that's a printed letter in an envelope with a stamp on it. We were that concerned that people were going to do the wrong thing, shall we say, when it came to games time. Okay, so now a word about the staff, bless us. Generally speaking, the press were having a real go at us. The press thought it's going to fail. It's going to be terrible. We can't host an Olympic Games. So the answer, of course, is staff morale, or staff morales. So here he is going around our office, cheering us up on a Wednesday morning in late June. Obviously that does the trick. What doesn't necessarily do the trick is when we all have to wear the Games Maker uniform. Some people loved it, some people didn't love it. But nonetheless, funny thing it is about wearing a uniform, it makes you feel all part of something. It makes everybody feel like they're working towards the same objective. I quite liked it. So let's look at some of the things we did at Games Time. Okay? Divided into two, really. Brilliant basics. So they're the things that you expect to see. Usually they're things that cost quite a bit of money. They've been a long time planning, so the big signage totems, if you like. I actually don't think that people really look at signage anymore. I think in this situation, just follow the crowds. That's what you do. The other thing, the thing that actually doesn't cost a penny, but is high perceived value, is the magic moment. So here we've got a photo opportunity where you can actually hold a genuine Olympic torch and have your pictures taken. And there were queues, there were good queues behind that. That's what people loved. Those are the memories, if you like. Now, we had high-performing spectators. We mustn't forget high-performing staff. So they are the geniuses, if you like, of the games, the ones that actually really do make it all happen. Now, let's look at some of the things that succeeded and failed. We thought that transport would fail. We literally thought that the London Metro, the tube, would collapse. It had never been stress-tested for the numbers of spectators and users at all previously. In actual fact, we'd had high numbers of sort of maybe a month or two earlier, and the Jubilee line, which was the main line going out to the Olympic Stadium, had actually fallen over. Luckily, and here's a top tip, you have your plan A, of course, but you also have a plan B, a plan C, and a plan D as well. So what that means is, in a practical term, you can divert spectators once they're leaving the stadium. So 80,000 people all leaving the stadium at once. You don't want them all to go to Stratford Station because that's just going to be mayhem. So you divert them to other exit routes. And here's a little magic moment. This took a long time in the making. So negotiating with Mayor of London and TfL to be able to put on some of the information displays, just little updates of the event. Maybe you've left and you're on the way home, and the train driver calls out on the tannoy, "You never believe it, that Usain Bolt's won gold on the 100 meters." That kind of thing. So it's a way of kind of keeping in touch with what's going on. Something that we thought would actually be fine and not have a problem with was the security. I won't go into the detail, but basically the private sector organisation that was going to provide the security game time messed up completely. I could have used a ruder word there, but I won't. And he messed up very publicly as well on BBC radio, extremely publicly, and that made us all extremely nervous. Now, of course, we put Plan B into operation. We were always going to have the military there. That was always going to happen. We merely just dialed up the military. More of them came along. And the military then did a lot of the security, as you could imagine, would be totally appropriate. And we realized they were actually better at delivering customer experience than the proper professional security people. And I'm sure with you guys over here in the USA, we have a very warm spot in our hearts for the military. And that made the whole experience not just feel safer, but feel more special. At Games Time, we did most of our work was around helping people to get to the right place at the right time. And here's a couple of examples of that. On the left there, we've got the world-famous Royal Marine Bands. So the gates open up first thing in the morning, so about 7:30. And the normal behavior is that people go into the Olympic Park and then they take their selfies. I'm here, I've arrived, that kind of thing. That's very dangerous when you've got sort of 30, 40,000 people doing that all simultaneously. So, like the story of the Pied Piper of Hamelin, the Marine Band sparks up, marches off into the park, and of course people then follow them quite naturally. This is something we learned from Disney. Disney do this very instinctively. On the right there, of course, sometimes we wanted people to hold back. We want you to stay in the park, to enjoy it, to avoid that kind of big bundle at the train station. So there's actually a small girl in that sack being wound around by that entertainer. But you've got a crowd of sort of 70 or 80 people enjoying that with her. So that's what some of my colleagues designed. But it worked. It achieved the kind of objectives of reducing kind of the risk of overcrowding at pinch points, but it also gave people a good experience. So that kind of the two things that we're doing there. Another interesting thing, so one of our partners is Coke, has been for a number of years. And each partner had a particular role to play. We designed in a role for them. And Coke, bless them, they were our portable queue line entertainers. So I could call them up on the radio and say, look, I'm at the shop down here near the Riverbank Stadium. There's a really big queue. Can you send like half a dozen of these very energetic boys and girls, do a little bit of song and dance and all that kind of stuff, and entertain the queues? When the queue goes down, they go off somewhere else. So kind of tactical kind of experiences, if you like. And there are other kind of festival-y, kind of concert-y kind of things that you might expect at a big outdoor event. Inside some of the venues, we did a lot to educate people as to what some of the... Oh, that's interesting. There we go. We did a lot to educate spectators as to what they were going to see. The ticketing policy was basically a lottery, so you couldn't always guarantee what tickets you were going to get. So you might get something that you weren't expecting. So hence, if you go into the weightlifting, you need to have a good idea of what's going to happen. So we created exhibitions, just explaining the rules and regulations, if you like. We put on sort of more typically British kind of entertainment to keep people happy. So this is down at Hyde Park. And then some of the sporting federations kind of chipped in with some interesting statues, if you like. You know, we were so cash-strapped that we literally had to take anything that was almost good enough. Anyway. We also help people to understand sport, as I said, sort of different nuances in archery and other kind of complex sports that the sport wasn't able to do itself. And we also help you try sports as well. So yes, that 5-year-old girl is about to fire an arrow. And who knows, she might be archery gold medalist in the future. That's how these things kind of happen, right? It's also a lot of fun. Other things that we did, sort of live sites, kind of more of a festival-y kind of atmosphere, if you like, a sort of traditional kind of enjoyment. In town, out of town, and then our mascots there that created carbon fiber mascots spread around London in particular. A good sort of spreading the love, if you like, spreading the experience. And in the background there, which you can see, of course, the Olympic rings. This is so cool. So that's Tower Bridge, not London Bridge, just in case there's anybody's confused. And of course, the bridge raises. And before the bridge raises, the Olympic rings kind of fold back. That's just awesome. I'm sure that's on YouTube somewhere. However, this is all good, but when it comes to the show, day one, if you like, we were pragmatic, realistic, to that last slide in the last presentation. We knew it wouldn't be right on day one. It never is going to be. You know, the best laid plans of mice and men, it's just not going to happen. We also knew it probably wouldn't be right on day 2, day 3. We gave ourselves the break, if you like, the realistic break that we know that it's not going to be right first time. There were lots of problems around queuing. It was literally, who owns the queues? We own the catering unit. We own the stadium. What about the bit in the middle? Who owns that? Who's going to help these people that are self-queuing, self-regulating, if you like, to know how to queue? Who's going to step in and speed that queuing up? Now, of course, if you've been to any major sporting event, you know, whether it's the baseball, the football, the cricket, the rugby, what have you, that you know that there are going to be guys going around with backpacks on full of beer, little trolleys, all that kind of stuff. We didn't have that. We couldn't afford it. So, but over the next few days, those kind of things magically appeared because this was just such a bad experience. So here's my only chart in this presentation. So apologies, anybody that loves charts. This is what, at Games time, this is what I did. Continual improvement of the spectator experience. So there's, in this little box here on the right, there's a number of sources of data, if you like. So insights from questionnaires, feedback on social media, speaking to the frontline staff. All of those things on a daily basis created a daily report. In that report, it was full of the things that are working and not working. That went to the venues and the functional areas, the departments. It also went off to the IOC and the IPC as well, so Big Brother is watching us. And all of those things were then set to improve the experience. And this happened on a daily basis, I think it's something we can all learn about that. But we did it on a daily basis because there's every chance on the last day of the games, it's going to be somebody's first experience. You know, I could just have, my tickets are on the last day, and if you say, well, you know, it's the last day, we won't bother kind of making those little adjustments, wrong. Every day is going to be somebody's first impression, first experience. So we ask a bunch of quant operational kind of questions, if you like, and we generate, this is my only spreadsheet, sorry about that. So these are all the venues across the top, a bunch of questions down the left-hand side, and the hotspots, if you like, what's not working. And no surprise, really, the value for money of food and drink was poor, universally poor. I think that queues for water, availability, free water, that was poor. And I think cleanliness of toilets. So, you know, it's all the basics. The basic things you can't get right that people complain about. What a surprise. So there's a daily report. That's actually a PowerPoint slide, but it's something that all of the stakeholders could digest. Bite-sized chunks, if you like. Bite-sized chunks every single day, just letting the senior stakeholders know where's good, where's not so good, what do we need to do. Experiential quant as well, kind of what one word sums up your experience. And these kind of word cloud things were really, really powerful because you could take one quick look at that and overall know what the temperature of the nation was, if you like, how spectators are kind of feeling. So that's, I think we were quite happy about that. Obviously, the words did change from day to day. I just happened to take a screenshot of the best one, of course. We monitored social media, so we didn't engage in conversations. We didn't have the manpower to do that, and we thought it was probably a risky strategy. But we listened and we watched. And we learned an awful lot from the service users as what was working and what wasn't working, what the conversations are about sporting legacy. Here we go, the one at the top right. I didn't even have to queue for the ladies' loo at the Olympic Park on the busiest day. Now that is impressive. Also, and this kind of geeked me out at the time, I'm sure it's commonplace now, but this is using geotagging to understand where tweets are coming from. So you don't actually need to say, I'm at the Olympic Park, because we would know from your tweet where you had tweeted. Now, obviously, that falls down if I kind of choose to tweet on my way home. I mean, on the A23 down to Brighton or something like that. But of course, we can apply kind of time, we know when you tweeted as well. So again, good and bad stuff. But we're listening, we're changing, we're improving. That's the important thing. We're trying to make things better. And we do it with the help of the spectators. So things like trying to put in more fresh water stations. I think there was an organisation in the UK that provides these kind of portable water fountains, and we used up every single one in the country. The same, Panasonic was our provider of flat-screen TVs. We used up every single 72-inch plasma screen that they had in the country. David Cameron, bless him, said, oh, no, I can't afford to see empty seats. So we had to have a strategy around informing spectators as to where there might be some free seats for them to go and enjoy. So we used every single one of these portable messaging systems that were available within the south of England. Some beautiful things that we had no control over, if you like. So again, when I'm talking about the austerity games, no budget to create kind of complex and informative notice boards or signage in the venues. There's directional signage for sure, but sort of informational signage, no way. But the information points, they get inundated with basic questions. So what do? They steal, they buy a whiteboard, and they make their own homemade signs. That's what the teams do. They also put up daily schedules because that information isn't available. And if I'm supporting South Korea in the fencing, I want to know where to sit and which hall to go to. Okay, nearly there. Now, at the end of the Olympics, there's a 2-week break, and the sponsor of the Paralympics, so that's Channel 4, the broadcasters, ran a really beautiful advertising campaign saying, thanks for the warm-up. And that's exactly how we felt. The Olympics is like 2.5 weeks. It's super intense. That's where you make all the mistakes. That's where all the big scrutiny is. But when it comes to the Paralympics, which takes place a couple of weeks afterwards, you've learned everything. You're now, if you can relax a little bit, and now this is the real show. And we did some fairly major things in that 2-week gap between the two games. One of them, and probably the most important, was to build Mascot House. Again, we couldn't afford mascots. We had a few, but kids come along to the Paralympics with their families, and they want to see Wenlock and Mandeville. So we build Mascot House. Everything that you could wish to do, see, buy, touch, be photographed with around mascots. And the kids and the families love it. However, I've gone forward a bit. However, actually, at the end of the day, it's not about, arguably, it's not about the spectators. It's about the sport that's taking place. That's what people are really going for. So even if they've had a kind of marginal experience getting there, this is only going to happen once in my lifetime, and I know that I'm going to go and see some cracking world-class sport. So this is Nicole Adams, so she's winning the first ever women's boxing gold medal. And of course, she's a Londoner. And that's the sort of thing that makes the Twitter sphere go absolutely ballistic because we've won something. In the Paralympics, so there's Dave Weir, he's on his way to his 4th gold medal. That's what you're there for. You're not there for the signage. You're not even there to have a photograph taken with the torch. You're there for the athletics or the sport. Ultimately, this is what it's about. It's not about return on investment. It's not about return on learning. It's not even really about how many medals we won. It's about reputation. So this is a reputation of UK, Team GB. Can we host the games? Yes, we can. Can we do it successfully? I think we did. And we proved that we can do that to the very critical audiences out there. So that's the real reason I believe that we did it. So thank you very much indeed.